There's been mixed reaction to the Mpumalanga legislature passing a motion by the economic freedom fighters to rename Kruger National Park to Skukuza National Park. The EFF argued that it was especially important to consider the changing key landmark names from figures such as Paul Kruger. Tourism experts and other political parties have argued that the change could impact international tourism and job security. Let's speak now to SANParks spokesperson JP Louw about their thoughts on the call. He joins us live now. JP, good morning. Welcome to Newzroom Afrika.
Good morning, Ms. Chava, and thank you very much for having us this morning.
Now, let's start with SANParks' official position. The Mpumalanga legislature has passed a motion to rename Kruger National Park to Skukuza National Park. What is SANParks' current stance on this proposal?
Look, we're aware of the motion, I forgot what it's called now, motion without notice, as it's called within the legislature, in our legislatures rather, and in this case specifically, that arose from the Mpumalanga legislature. And of course, we would appreciate that with any of our national parks, if you were, especially with an iconic one like Kruger National Park, if there was a discussion point about change of name, we would have an interest in the issue. We followed up to try to understand where the matter was going. And our understanding is that as we speak right now, there is no formal process underway to look at name change at Kruger National Park. Mpumalanga legislature processes there unfolded as it were, but that's not really the place through which we would engage around the name change. And if it so happened that the matter is put officially on the table,
sure,
as SANParks would, of course, also follow the legal framework of things to make sure that we can make our own contributions.
All right, so it's a tabled motion that still needs to be voted on, but help our viewers understand SANParks' role here. When it comes to park naming decisions, what authority does SANParks actually have? I mean, can you unilaterally decide to keep the current name, or are there other stakeholders who ultimately make this decision?
No, certainly the issues of naming rights, even the declaration of a national park, those are not things that SANParks does. SANParks' responsibility is just to look into the management aspect of it. You will see, hopefully within still the course of this year, there might be a new national park declared, and the person who will then be declaring the national park will be the minister, including even the issue about naming and the likes. So SANParks doesn't really name national parks. SANParks doesn't really declare national parks, but definitely is the authority responsible for management of our national parks right across the country.
Okay. And you've mentioned in a previous interview that name changes are governed by national legislation, as you've indicated, not provincial motions. But if we can be a little bit more specific, which exact piece of legislation governs park name changes?
I'm going to speak a little bit out of, because I'm trying to remember the law specific, because I think it's the NEMPA, the National Environment Management Protection Act, I think it's called. It then allows the minister to be able to declare a national park, as you were. But that must be separated from issues about name changing. You know, things such as changing of names of airports, changing of names of streets and the likes. That is another completely different competence also that doesn't belong within SANParks. And I think then now you start to talk about the Department of Arts and Culture and the likes. And also there's normally a whole consultative process that I believe that starts at local level and goes up to province and national and so on. But all of those things are not within the competence of SANParks, even our own portfolio. So just those two also needs to be separated as well, you know, okay. The national parks specifically and the overall issue about name changing in South Africa.
So why does SANParks seem hesitant about honoring an indigenous conservation leader like Chief Skukuza? What is your organization's basic philosophy on this issue?
I wouldn't say that we don't appreciate indigenous leadership or even indigenous knowledge for that matter. Those are some of the very key principles that we've even embedded in our 5-year strategy that's just been adopted this year. So one of the things you will see coming out there quite strongly is that And we even work very closely, for example, with traditional healers, are in the process of making, or at some point soon, we'll also be making some a bigger announcement about quite a very organized fashion in which we're working with that sector of society. And when you talk about traditional healers, and also when you talk about traditional leaders, you're talking really within the space of indigenous knowledge system. So our relationship there with that sector, I would want to argue, is really very, very strong.
Sure.
And we continue to work with them. On Skukuza specifically, I wouldn't want to go too much onto the specifics of the name. It has its own history. I believe even the name belongs to this warden, a white person, in fact, who was staying around that area, and then was nicknamed Skukuza by the locals there
Which
as well.
apparently
But that's
means
another
a
subject
broom, which apparently means a broom that sweeps clean.
Correctly.
Yeah, it's quite
Correctly.
interesting, the history of that. But the EFF motion specifically stated that they do not want to celebrate heritage through someone described as the father of apartheid. So how do you respond to the criticism that SANParks is essentially prioritizing commercial considerations over the dignity of Black South Africans who might find it offensive to celebrate their heritage in a park named after Paul Kruger?
Yeah, that would be a bit unfair, really, because I wouldn't know in what context that would be said. I can give you a whole long, huge basket of things we do. Relationships we have even with historical land claimants who are definitely direct victims of the apartheid system, and a whole lot of other things we do. Bursaries that we offer that are specifically targeted at times at young people. The kind of, if you go to Kruger National Park, let's pick that as an example. You must look at the workforce that is there and where they come from. A partnership we formed with the Makuleke community in the northern parts of the Kruger, where we're running together a contractual park through our capacitation and support. The community there has been able to employ, I think, up to about 90% of its own community within that park. So I really wouldn't know what informs such a type of argument. But also, as I've indicated, we do not dictate the naming as SANParks.
Sure.
That is a responsibility that lies elsewhere.
All right.
If you then want to begin to question SANParks about that, I really think that kind of criticism would really be being laid in the wrong direction.
Sure, but do you support it, though, as part of your transformation policy?
Support what specifically?
Now support the name change of the Kruger National Park as part of your transformation policy.
I think it's a bit early days to get to that, Mashaba. When that discussion indeed happens, of course, you do have to make all of these particular considerations. What are the social concerns, like you said, the historical context that goes with the name? What does it mean for tourism? Other people have raised that question as well. You do have to think about that as well and look at all of these things combined and say, this is a future that we want to go towards. On our part as SANParks, we've emphasized quite strongly the vision of what we refer to as inclusive conservation. We even have put a blueprint on the table that we call Vision 2040 that gives us very clear directives of where we're going and even a timeline of what we're working towards. Now, within the confines of all of that, there's even things like regenerative tourism, for example, within this. So within the context of all of that, we will then engage with all of these matters. But all the time, we are a state entity, so all the time we'll want to comply with where the law directs us.
All right.
So if the law says the role of SANParks in this process is X, we would do that.
All right.
But if it says the role of SANParks is not Y, then we wouldn't do that.
Here's what troubles me, JP. Your statement suggests that SANParks views honoring struggle heroes and transformation as secondary to tourism revenue. Shouldn't an organization managing South Africa's national heritage be leading transformation efforts rather than perhaps dragging its feet because of hypothetical marketing challenges?
I do think that in the end, the discussion point and the issues should talk to the facts as they are on the table. And as I was giving you now an example of a firm relationship, I mean, you must go look up the history of the people of Makuleke and the land claim that they successfully attained. And the fact that they now run a very successful national park, or rather part of Kruger are running a contractual park aspect to that. You must go and look at that, how that has come about. We are busy right now, for example, with other land claimants in Kruger, looking at what's called beneficiation schemes. That's over and above the fact that the land claims have been successful. They've already been accorded their rights in terms of other legislative processes that are run through the Department that's responsible for land affairs and so on. And I can pick a lot of examples, Mashaba. SANParks of today, for example, in terms of representativity at its management level, it's very different. I mean, there was a point in SANParks where, in the main, when you talk about the composition of the organization, you would say that it's an organization mainly run by people who are mainly white. Right now, on the issue of gender, on the issue of race, I think that we're really doing very, very well.
All right.
Even at the level of our park management as well.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying. The fact speaks differently, you know.
Okay.
And yes, at the same time, we do look at revenue generation. This past year, for the first time, we've generated revenue of like close to over 4 billion. Why is that good? Because it means we put less pressure on the state coffers.
All right, let's talk about that a little bit
money
more.
Can be spent on other things.
Yeah, let's expand on that a bit more. We are running out of time, but let's talk about SANParks' marketing concerns. You mentioned tourism confusion. Now, the South African government managed to rebrand the entire country internationally after 1994. Brand South Africa, the Department of Tourism, these are sophisticated marketing machines. Are you suggesting they couldn't successfully market Skukuza National Park globally?
No, I can't say that. I think that would be an unfair view to express on those particular entities. And I certainly am not the person to want to judge and cast aspersion about their competence. But, you know, I do think that there's nothing that is as useful as patience in the end of these sorts of things. And we cannot pretend that we don't have a variety of point of views on issues of this nature. But secondly, most importantly, in South Africa, due process matter. So we should wait for the time when the process, if it is to happen, is undertaken by the relevant authorities. And then when that happens, we can start to have discussions about name change and in which direction. You know, if we want to Skukuza, is that the right way to go? Do we stay the way that we are? What does it mean if we stay the way we are, etc., etc.? By the way, the discussion point about name change in Kruger is not new. I mean, it's been on the public discourse space for quite some years. But
sure.
what we don't have currently is for it to be dealt with formally. You go now to Gqeberha. When you're in Gqeberha, that's a name, a city whose name has changed. The airport called Chief Davis Tierman, that airport's name also had to change. All of those things follow their own due processes.
Sure.
Until the point that reach where it is.
So with that
so you would
said,
also have to go through the same.
Sure. No, it's understandable. It's part of due process. In closing, as we wrap it up, and very briefly, why is SANParks particularly concerned that changing the name will confuse the tourists? I mean, the park will still be there. The Big Five will still roam the same territory. The tourists will always find their way to the park and the destination with the animals they want to see, and they will receive the same experience. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, but I don't know what informs the view that says that we are against the name change. We are not for or against it at this point, right? All we are saying is that the relevant authorities that must deal with that will deal with it. If the name is changed, some parks will continue with management of that park, right? And that's where we are as an institution. We are not against for either of that. Safe to say to you that the way that we get to a different name should be through due process. And that process will itself dictate to SANParks how it participates in the name change effort.
All right. Thank you so much for clarifying that, and thank you for your time.